r/askreddit. What's the strangest punishment your parents ever gave you? My parents said I was playing too much Skyrim when it came out, so they took the router with them to work every day. Good thing you don't need internet to play an offline single player game. LMAO, my parents definitely did not understand technology and they'd do stuff like this but even less effective. Like they'd turn the screen off and assume that meant the entire machine was shut down and everything was lost. Or like everything was plugged into a power strip, so they'd take the power strip away but all the plugs and outlets were still right there. So one time my mom kept holding the off button down, but I was sitting there on the screen with the mouse and keyboard and a window would pop up asking whether I actually wanted to turn the computer off. So I just kept clicking no, leave the computer on. She could not for the life of her understand why it didn't work. My mum would take the DSL cable from the wall to the router to work with her. She didn't realize we could hook up the cable from the actual telephone into the router and regain a connection. I pissed off my mom one day and as punishment she stormed into my room and took the power cord from my computer. I hadn't played on the computer in like 1 year. It wasn't connected to the internet and only had the Sims on it. She was so pissed and ripped the cord so hard it moved my desk away from the wall, and I didn't even care. Not a very well thought out punishment. My father would unplug a certain plug from the router, lock the closet it was in with a padlock and chains and take the keys to work with him every day. Funnily enough, the chains weren't tight enough and the router wasn't deep in the closet at all, so pulling the closet with force gave just enough room for my hand to sneak in and pull the cable back in. For some reason my parents allowed my brother and I to have a very basic bow and arrow which we were allowed to shoot at a cardboard box in the backyard. I, being very young and very dumb, crawled into the box while my brother was firing. Parents were not pleased, and to demonstrate how dangerous what I had done was, they made me lay on the couch for the whole day and pretend I was in a hospital bed. I mean, if you were an active kid and weren't allowed to move or play with toys, boring TV and bland food, I can see that as a punishment. Still weird though. Lol, that's actually pretty hilarious. I hated timeout as a kid, so that was probably actually a pretty effective punishment. I had to cut open tennis balls with pennies. I'm still not sure what that was about. I was innocent BTW. I kinda wanna do that just to know what that's like. Seems weird, but IDK. I can't help but think this has something to do with some weird ass illegal activity, cause I have no other explanation for this. Why isn't this at the top? The answers above this one are all pretty common even if they don't make much sense. This one is weird as fuck. Me and my sister were fighting after I tried to steal some of her chili fries and she stabbed me with a fork. Dad took us out back and tied us up face to face with a rope. Told us when you figure out how to work together you will be able to get out. Did you work together and get out? When I was 10, mom would take my NES games for a week. When I was 13, mom would take my SNES games for a week. When I was 16, mom would take my blank floppy disks for a week. I didn't explain the mistake to her until I moved out. All I can imagine is just a drawer full of floppy disks with names on them which are all blank and an old cardboard box of numbered floppy disks with stuff on them. I would get grounded to the front porch because when I was grounded in my room I would entertain myself with literally anything, even lint from the carpet. So my dad finally had enough and made me sit on the front porch, and I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone except to say that I'm grounded and can't talk. Random stranger walks by. Hi, I'm grounded. My dad said I can't talk to you. This reminds me of Doofenshmirtzu's past, where he was made to be a garden gnome by his parents and couldn't talk to anyone. If I misbehaved in a car, my mom would lower the window and say that a bird would fly in if I'd continue to misbehave. Were you afraid of birds? Or just the thought of getting a bird smacked into your face at terminal velocity? I was not allowed to read unless it was specifically for school. My teachers stopped letting me bring books to class because I would finish my work early and read. I got the answers right and I wasn't causing trouble, so I still don't get why. My dad took away my Harry Potter books because I was reading too much. Edit. For what it's worth, he gave them back by the end of the night because he felt bad. He just didn't like that I was upstairs reading all the time instead of spending time with family. Shit, as a huge reader this would suck. Matilda? When I was little, my mom's go-to punishment was to make me kneel on uncooked rice for about 15 minutes. Had to keep a straight back or else the time was increased. She did this because that was how her mom punished her and her brother. She eventually stopped using this punishment after she set some clear boundaries with my very controlling grandmother. She never felt right making me do it. My little sister never had to go through it. I kind of resented that for a while, but eventually was grateful she didn't experience it. That is a double glow up. Your mom was like my mom is not, so I'm not following her examples, and realized even the stuff that worked in the past was bullshit. You realize that going through it was cruel and your sister was lucky to avoid it and it was good. I am so happy. Filipino family, or Southeast Asian? Fairly common old school punishment back in the days of my parents and their parents, etc. There's also squatting, hands extended with books balanced on top, standing in a corner with books balanced on your head. These being common school punishments. That is just cruel. Glad she stopped. My mom was pretty old school, so she wasn't against spanking, which was my usual punishment. Strangest was when I made fun of my sister for wetting the bed, calling her a baby and stuff. My mom wasn't happy because I was making her cry and setting her back. So as a punishment she made me wear a pull-up whenever my sister had to. A lot to unpack there. If I cursed, my mom would make me go into the bathroom and say every curse I knew while looking in the mirror so I could see how ugly I made myself look while cursing. Well, I learned that if I wanted to curse with impunity, all I had to do was say ass and get sent to the bathroom where I could say any curse I could think of, punishment free, for as long as I wanted. Lol. Accidentally taught you venting coping skills. Neat. Withheld dinner and I was only allowed to have bread and butter. My mother is a terrible cook, so I was super okay with this. My stepsister was denied dinner once because my dad decided the whole family was going to share this giant nacho plate and that was our only option for dinner. My stepsister and I were close, so later I made and snuggled her a PB&J sandwich. Later that evening everyone but her stepsister was violently ill from the nachos. I was always more the artist type. Didn't much care for throwing the football around or working on cars. I wasn't belittled or anything, my family let me do me. But my stepfather was an evil genius, and when I did something that was considered a minor infraction he'd give me the option of either going to bed early or staying up till my normal bedtime but having to watch sports with him in the living room. And I couldn't just zone out or read. He'd sit there and make chit chat about the game or try explaining the rules or the player's stats or something else I couldn't have cared less about. I'm 34 and we still laugh about that sometimes. Shit was brutal. To be fair, your stepdad probably wanted to spend time with you doing something he liked as well. If my son ends up not liking sports, not gonna lie, it would be really sad for me. Yeah, I will accept whatever he likes, but right now I do have hope of watching sports with him and getting happy exited etc when something happens. Dad made me splice together his old 8mm vacation films into a Vine style highlight reel after I hurt his feelings by refusing to see Chef with him. Why did you refuse to watch it with him, and have you watched it with him since then? What did you think about his vacation films? No punishment. And that in itself was punishment. I totally bombed during my first semester in college. I took 16 credits and ended up with a 0.77 GPA for the semester. Yes, less than 1.0. My parents were disappointed, but told me that they knew I could do better, and they knew I would do better. They forgave me and basically said, okay, so you screwed up, now make it better and make us proud. The fact that they were not upset really weighed on me. It really put a ton of guilt and shame upon me. Even though they didn't put those things on me, I did it to myself. It really motivated me to not dick around any longer in college. I buckled down and really succeeded. I failed my first semester of college. I lived in the dorms. I obviously had to move back home. Like most teenagers, I was scared of my old man. If I was misbehaving, all my mom had to say was wait till your father gets home, and the fear of God would be put into me. I thought he was going to yell, scream and or curse at me. He didn't do any of that. When I came home, he just looked at me and said, you basically blew an almost free ride to college. I'm disappointed in you, man, that fucking hurt. I got a bad grade on a math test in elementary school. As my dad dropped me off for the day, I quickly told him he needed to sign something, the test. He was so furious that even though I was already late for school, he drove the 2 miles back home, spanked me and made me walk to school. I was so late. I understand that parents want their kids to do well in school, but getting angry like that over a bad grade is so dumb and rather counterproductive. My parents would yell at me if I wasn't on the honor roll and say things that just made me feel like crap. Instead of going to them for help when I was struggling in school, I talked as little about school with them as possible. A little brother. I still don't know what I did wrong. You're such a disappointment. They wanted a fresh start. My dad's punishments were odd. If he caught me doing something I wasn't meant to, he wouldn't stop me from doing it. He'd make me do it more and more until I was sick of it. It worked quite well, tbh. Edit. So a lot of people seem to think I'm a guy. Sorry folks, I have a vagina. My parents caught me with a pack of smokes. They had me sit down at the kitchen table and chain smoke a full pack. And I got ill. And 3 days later, started smoking again. My dad smoked and had tried to quit for years. You'd think they'd have a better understanding of addiction. Edit. No, I'm not Bobby Hill. But feel like I cold bin. I did this to my kid once. He was throwing a ball in the house. We have a no throwing rule because of the big TV, and I was sick of it always happening. Like 3-4 times per week I'd catch him. So I had him put on outdoor gear and made him throw a ball back and forth across the backyard in the snow. It was silly, not harmful, and it fit the crime. He kept looking at me through the window, crying and pitiful. It was satisfying. Son is caught snorting cocaine. Dad says, now you are going to snort cocaine until your nose bleeds and you collapse. Good thing he never caught you masturbating. I was being a dick as a teen. I think I was 15, and tormenting my little brother by grossing him out. Stuff like burping in his face when he didn't expect it, making him smell my feet, etc. And he really hated it. It made me laugh and I called him a pussy for being grossed out so easily. After he came to her crying one day about it, my mom warned me that if I didn't stop, I'd be very sorry. I didn't listen. Worst mistake of my childhood. My mom ran a small doggy daycare pet grooming business. The next time I did this to my brother, she put me to work cleaning filthy dog kennels, without gloves, and without a scooper. Worse, she introduced me to what dog anal glands are, which groomers often have to express. Around 3 times a day that week, I had to express dog anal glands. I was not allowed to wear gloves. I puked. Every single time. She planned on the punishments lasting all week, but my bro asked her to let me off the hook after he saw how defeated and broken I looked by Wednesday. That sounds fair except the whole no gloves thing. Why do so many of these comments involve animal fluids? There should only be so many. My parents routinely took away my library card when I did something worth punishing. So I memorized it. When they caught on, they refused to go to the library with me for the duration of my punishment. So I started volunteering at the library once a week, so they had to take me. Steady on, Hermione. Improvise, adapt, overcome. Not really a strange punishment, but it turned out strangely, I think. When I was probably 5 or 6, something happened. Literally can't remember what I did to deserve the punishment that caused my parents to send me to my room with no lights allowed on and the door closed. I'd never been able to sleep with the door closed and at least a light on in the hall or something till then. This time, I just went to sleep after a while in there with no lights, and that was the last time I needed lights on or the door open when I went to bed. Worked out well from my point of view, emo. Worked out well from their point of view too. They were mad I was playing too many video games, Civilization, Master of Orion II, World of Warcraft I, Final Fantasy I, 2, 3, Tactics, Ogre Battle, Urquan Masters. Okay, so I played lots of games, so they made me go out with friends more. Now keep in mind, I did have friends and was social and would go out once or twice a week with them. But any video games were bad. So my parents forced me to go hang out in my buddy's garage where they just drank and smoked up at 13 years old. A couple of them ended up getting into some serious drugs by around 16, and my parents still were forcing me to go hang out with them, because their parents were good people that will sort him out. Well, they never did. I always thought it was funny that they considered cerebral strategy games more damaging to my development than hanging out with 13-16-year-old drunks. That's freaking stupid. I actually give credit to video games for me not getting into so much trouble as a teenager. My old friends from elementary school weren't as into video games as I was, so by middle and high school we had drifted apart. They got into trouble with cops on a regular basis. World of Warcraft, which was mainly what I played at the time, only kept me from sometimes not getting my homework done. Kind of relevant. I was a troubled teen. I played some games on console, but mostly I was out of the house hanging out with the other troubled kids from my neighborhood. Got into a lot of trouble, fights, weed, was arrested multiple times and witnessed murders. When I was around 17 I got into Diablo, made a lot of friends online and ended up ditching almost all of my friends IRL. Most of them are either dead, in out of prison, or have 5+ kids with multiple girls. I'm not quite proud of my gaming addiction, but it really did put me on a better path in life. One time when I was super young, I didn't eat all of the food on my plate. My dad told me I was gonna eat it or wear it. I was full and I said I'm not gonna eat it. Then my dad slammed my head into my plate of food. Death was a very strange punishment. Started off odd, got violent fast. Either he was going to make you put the food in your pockets or something. Damn. Okay, I'm sorry I laughed because I pictured the video where the kids slam their heads into a book and table. But seriously, the hell kind of punishment is that? Edit. Oh wow, I didn't expect the silver. Thank you, kind redditor might not mean anything but have some virtual cake. Forced to smell dog breath. Because if we have to deal with the filth from your mouth, then you have to deal with the filth from its mouth. I got this on numerous occasions. It sounds silly at first, but it was anything but at the time. I begged them to give me anything but that. Like for swearing? I beat up a bully. My mom had a strong conversation with me, and then took me out for sushi. I punched a girl that was bullying me at my friend's house in the nose and made her cry. My mom reprimanded me while we were there. After we got home that night, she told me I did a good job and gave me ice cream and $2. I was 5 and she was 7, so probably wasn't much of a punch, lol. When I did beat up my bully, my parents were called and my dad came pick me up. We sat in the car and the conversation went like, "This the guy picking on you all the time? Yes. The one we talked about with your teacher and headmaster? Yes. Did he start it? Yes. Would you do it to anyone not picking on you? No good. But if he does it again, would you do it again? You should, son. Now let's get ice cream." Me too. I got grounded for 30 days. But under his breath, my dad said good job. When I was 16 I got caught shoplifting a CD. Thankfully they didn't press charges, but my father confiscated every possession I owned short of the essentials: mattress, blankets, clothes, and ironically, a $200 police scanner, still in the box, he didn't know about. And that's how I got into listening to police scanners. Edit. Scanner was shoplifted as well, and I never shoplifted again after getting caught. Stolen, I assume. We had 4 cats. Mostly because I wanted them. But I often would forget to clean their litter boxes because it grossed me out. Especially when one of the cats weren't feeling well. I couldn't stand the stench. So I often just kept putting it off until someone else did. After my mom got tired of this, I came home from high school one day to find all of the litter boxes moved into my bedroom. I was told they would stay there for a week. I was not allowed to open windows or to sleep anywhere besides my bedroom. She also replaced the litter we were using to a brand with no odor reduction. It doesn't sound like much, but oh my god, it was horrible. I would have much rather been spanked. That sounds like a firm but fair punishment to me. You had been making everyone else smell the scent of your cat's waste. It was your turn to understand what you were subjecting them to. My parents made me join my school's cross-country team because I quit the football team. They also made me join the basketball team. And the debate team. I think they had like 3 ideas for punishment and just did all of them. They just wanted you out of the house. I was deathly afraid of my basement, and the threat from not adhering to lights out time was being forced to sleep in the basements for the night. Anyway, I forget what I was doing, but I was up to no good one night, probably reading comic books with a flashlight or something. I got sent to sleep in the basement and was pretty much up all night being super scared. It was threatened a lot, but I think it only actually happened once. I was a smartest kid. My aunt tried once to threaten me that the boogeyman will take me to the basement if I don't behave and eat me. Can you hear him roar? My 4-yo smart mouth. Auntie, you know better, that's the boiler. She said I was super condescending and that made her quit. Then one day she broke a wooden spoon whipping my ass, and I still tense up hearing the drawer clang open to this day. One time I forged my mom's signature on a school discipline warning thing. She made me write my own signature 500 times so I wouldn't write the wrong name again. My brother was caught shoplifting video games at the age of 14. I was 10, at home and totally unaware of what he was doing at the time. The police had been called, and my parents had to pick him up at the station, a scared straight kind of thing. Understandably, he was lectured and grounded from video games plus certain other privileges for 3 months. No, so understandably I too was included in this punishment. When I protested and pleaded my undisputed innocence, the only reply was a confusing mishmash of contradictory explanations. I would never do that to a kid. This makes me sad. When one of us would do something bad as kids, my mom would ground us all if we didn't fess up. I was a good kid who was deathly afraid of getting in trouble, so it was pretty much never my fault. My mom pretty openly hated having kids, so it was probably just her way of getting us all to leave her alone, lol. Group punishment is banned for POWs under the Geneva Conventions. My parents had an advertisement agency. They would also do preprint work. I don't know the English term for it, but they would do photo editing and magazine editing, ebooks for high schools and such. I was at 5th grade. I found out they were doing the color and photo editing for a Turkish porno magazine called Çikolata, and took it to school and monetized it. NBA collector cards, countless chocolate bars, Magic the Gathering cards, soccer cards were my main currency. I was the king among men. Then a cunt tried to get his cards back and threatened me to tell the headmaster. I tore one of his cards and said, if you tell them I will mess the others too. He told on me. The fugger didn't see my bluff. I mean, I cut the cards just in spite. My punishment was to start working for my parents' company after school for 2 hours every day. I learned Photoshop, Corel, scanning old school photo films, learned the printing machine and such. I got good, so they made me work until 7th grade, until they divorced and sold the company. Their divorce was the best thing happened. Suicide. My mother would attempt it if she didn't get her way. Well, this got pretty dark. Hey, that's somewhat manipulative. I got grounded a lot. That's not weird, but my mom refused to call it a grounding. She'd just give me a bunch of individual punishments that added up to a grounding. Can't leave the house. Can't hang out with friends. Can't play with most of my toys. But if I told someone I was grounded, she got upset. I think maybe the distinction she had in her head was that I was allowed to leave my room and talk to my family members, instead of being kept in my bedroom like her parents' version of grounding. Sent me to their room. My room had a full-size color TV with cable, video games, and all my stuff. Their room had a bed and a tiny black and white TV with an antenna that only got one channel, and well, most boring night ever. Told this story before and was called Satan. I basically raised my little brother. When he was in middle school, he was failing math. He would always forget to turn in assignments, refuse tutoring, and didn't study for quizzes. I told him if he failed, I'd do something drastic. He failed on the year. So I deleted every save in his PS2. All of them. There were hundreds of hours of saved games. Never saw him cry so hard in my life. He passed summer school with a B. Edit. I am getting a lot of hate and will certainly get more in a minute, but here is more to the story. This was a year-long frustration. We would do homework together and he wouldn't hand it in, and the teacher wouldn't accept it late. He refused to study. His pattern of behavior was out of control. For all the people saying I should have gave him blank memory cards and gave him the real ones later, he would have seen right through it. He is smart. No, I deleted those files in front of him. He needed to change his behavior and I had a real hard time disciplining him as his brother and not his parent. I hated how hard he cried. It felt horrible. There was no other way. I know it was cruel. My mom always told me I would end up in prison. As punishment, she would make me sit in timeout under an office desk with a slat back chair turned upside down on top so the back covered the opening like bars. Come dinner time she fed me hard rolls and water because that's what they serve in prison. I found out years later, while not good food, prison food is much better than hard rolls and water. When I was preparing for high school I sucked at writing, particularly long response essay questions. To mediate this my dad spent a week having me write a different essay every day of the most simple and mundane tasks. The one that really sticks out in my mind was the first one, how to put a football away. By doing this, though it seemed inhumane at the time, I learned how to expand a simple thought into highly descriptive details and became a great writer throughout the rest of my school career. I had to write book reports on books of the Bible. I would have to read the book of the Bible, discuss the major themes, and explain how it related to my bad behavior. As a result, I really know my Bible and no longer believe in religion. Wasn't allowed to go trick-or-treating that year because I didn't lie to my babysitter about not having eaten breakfast that day. Couldn't pass this comment without saying how shameful that is. Kids should never be made to cover up the failings of fully grown adults. Sorry you had to go through this. Give me my dessert on top of the vegetables I didn't want to finish. The next time I made sure to finish my plate. Odd perhaps, but it worked. My mom would just make me eat them for breakfast the next morning if I didn't finish my vegetables. It was the worst. I was super picky as a kid so I actually found mustard made it more bearable. A lot of mustard, didn't matter what it is, it got slathered in mustard. I've probably eaten more mustard than any other human being. Made me eat biscuits and gravy. I absolutely hated that food as a kid. My obese stepfather hated it. So often the punishment was having those for dinner. I often just didn't eat, which was fine by him. He got my portion. Oof, I was also punished with being served foods I did not like. It was head cheese for my family. I was the only one who couldn't stomach it. Difference being that my parents made me finish, and if I vomited they'd beat me for wasting food. And this isn't some story from the old ages. That shit happened 20 years ago in a western first world country. If I got into fights with my brother's sister, we had to stand nose to nose for an hour. Ugh. When I was 5 my dad had this threat he would always use that went like putting us under the stream or something. I can't put it right in English words. I didn't understand what that meant until one night I just couldn't fall asleep so I was there lying in bed and when he came to check up on us, shared room with my 2 sisters, and saw me awake he decided it was my fault and he had to punish me, so he dragged me to the bathroom and put my head under the running cold water tap until my hair was soaked, then sent me to bed like that. A while later when he had presumably fallen asleep my mom came, having heard the entire thing happen because I was obviously shouting at him to stop, and dried my hair, cursing him up and down. To this day I still don't understand what his logic was and he laughs about it when I mention it. He always had it out for me during those years for some reason. And if you're wondering why my mom didn't stop him, my guess would be during that time housewives just didn't really go against their husbands for whatever reason. I don't hold it against her though. My mum turned off the electricity instead of turning off the Wi-Fi when I was playing too much MC. I'm terrified of the dark and I was really scared that some monster was in the house. I screamed so loud we got noise complaints from both neighbors. Mow the lawn with one of those ancient lawn mowers. It sucked. Was grounded so much in my life. I would say 3/5 of my first 16 years were grounded. Neighbor convinced my mom to take me to family counseling. When I sat down with him he asked what my main complaint with them was. I said all of the grounding. So he came up with a list of rules, and if I break them, I get kicked out instead of being kept in, but not kicked out to go hang with my friends. So, they put a tent up in the backyard, and when I broke a rule, I was banished to the tent for a predetermined amount of time. This didn't end up working out, because breaking curfew was 12 hours out in the tent. So I would start breaking curfew on purpose, go out to the tent, wait for my parent to go to sleep, and sneak out of the tent and go hang with my friends all night, until the night I came home to a dead patch of grass where the tent had been, and I had to sleep the night on the patio. I woke up to my next door neighbor staring at me through the fence shaking his head. Safe to say, my parents went back to grounding me after that. Side note, the counselor we went to was later arrested for molesting children. My mother used to lock me in the trunk of the car if I annoyed her. I'd spend about 8 hours at a time with her driving sealed away in there. Oof, another one. It was my birthday and I didn't like the food my father made once as he puts chili in things knowing I am allergic to them. I refused to eat it for his amusement. He stormed upstairs and chucked my presents down. He stomped on them, ripped up all my birthday cards, egged. I was about 11. I hope you're okay as an adult. My dad sent me to my room. No biggie, right? Well, that's until you hear why. Reason, I did my f***ing homework. He claims I was in his way and needed to get out for some exercise, but it was already overdue so I couldn't. Although I think the only reason he acted this way is because of his mood swings that he gets from his PTSD. I love him, but his mental issues are a nightmare when in action. Mum found out I ditched mass at school, Catholic school, so she made me go to all 7 masses offered by my church that weekend. Total time over the weekend spent in church was like 10 hours. I had the gospel and the homily memorized. When I was ages 6-10, a typical punishment consisted of being made to wear a diaper and then treated like a baby for the rest of the day. Several times I was even sent to school wearing the diaper, and if anyone came over while this punishment was going on I had to show them what I was wearing underneath my pants. Dude, that's straight up abuse. What the hell? When I was 6 I did something stupid that angered my dad and I wasn't allowed to mention anything related to Pokemon for a month. When I was in the 7th grade I got a 2-day suspension for fighting. We were playing kickball and this one kid, Alexis, was being a real dick with everyone. Purposely trying to bean them as pitcher and running into them trying to knock them over when he was taking a base. I'm playing second base at one point and he runs into me like that, knocks me back. He was pretty fat so it was a hard hit, and I just lost it and got up and started throwing punches. The gym teacher came and broke us up right away and dragged us to the principal's office. I'm lucky that it wasn't now because I would have probably gotten expelled, but I got off with just 2 days of suspension. I explained to my parents why I was fighting and they understood I was just standing up to an asshole. It just so happened that my grandfather and aunt were visiting from Mexico during that time. That aunt is 7 years younger than me. My grandfather had another kid with his new wife in his 60s. And my parents decided that my punishment would be to babysit and play with her the 2 days I was out of school. I always found it funny that my punishment for fighting was being a babysitter so my dad and my grandpa could do more stuff without a hyper little kid around. I failed pay because I wouldn't dress out. My dad was so flabbergasted that I got no punishment. My parents believed in beatings, so it was strange. Coincidentally, that's when I joined marching band. Counted as pay credit. I had to write 500,000 sentences once. I got about 1/3 of the way done and my dad noticed I was writing one word at a time down the list, because in my mind that was faster, and he made me start over. The funny part is, I can't remember what the sentence was or why I had to write them in the first place. I flunked fluid mechanics twice in a row at university. My dad made me move 2 hours away from campus, was living next to campus, for the remainder of my undergraduate program, with 2 years left. Had to take a 4-hour commute every single fucking day, and where I'm at, school starts at 6:30 am, so I had to be leaving my place every day at 4:30 am.